Hello again and welcome to Shed Talk, the magazine type video series looking at the breeding, keeping and showing of Exhibition Budgerigars, particularly here in the UK, but of course around the world in general. So with the holiday season upon us, we need to start thinking about going away, and it's something we haven't really had to think about for the last 18 months, 2 years, as most of us have not been able to travel very much. So it's not something we've had to think about, and the holiday season presents anybody who keeps any sort of livestock, whether that be just a pet bird in a cage, you know, an aviary that you've got in the garden just for fun, or whether, like me, you keep birds or you breed birds and you show them. It presents us with a problem because the birds still require to be looked after. They still require feed, they still require watering, and all the rest of it that goes with that. So that's what I'm going to look at in this video, because I'm about to go away on holiday, so I thought it would be quite nice to do a quick video on the things that I do, the preparation that I make prior to going away and handing the birds over to somebody to look after. But before I do that, as always, thanks to all those people who support the channel, whether that be you sending pictures in or the comments you make, and in particularly those of you who subscribe to the channel. Don't forget, if you haven't already subscribed, please do. Of course, if you enjoy the videos, hit the like button, and don't forget, if you want early notification, then do hit the bell. While I'm on the subject of early notifications, I do plan to try and do a few videos, maybe some short videos or other videos that I can upload prior to going away, and then they will be scheduled to be released at the normal sort of time when I would normally release the video. So what it does mean though is that I won't be able to post those on the various Facebook groups straight away. So if you do want notification of when those videos are going to be shown, then do hit the bell, and of course do subscribe. So let's think about what we're going to need to do before going away on holiday. So going away, and I need to find somebody to look after the birds. I don't work in partnership with somebody, so unlike those who are a partnership, it means that you could share that load, I suppose, in terms of who looks after the birds and where they are, assuming that you're going to go away on holiday at different times. The other thing is clearly the hobby is getting smaller. The number of people who actively breed and show any type of birds, I think, is gradually dwindling, particularly here in the UK. It appears that way. And of course, most of the fancy tends to be of a slightly older generation. So this means that there are fewer people within the hobby for you to ask to look after the birds. In fact, the person I would probably ask is away at exactly the same time as me, so I can't even do that. I can't even ask them to look after the birds. This presents us with the dilemma that actually the pool of people available is getting smaller. You're going to have to ask them to travel further to come and look after your birds in most cases, and I would guess it's becoming more and more impractical, and more of us, like myself, would have to turn to a non-bird keeper to look after the birds, and this presents its own problems. You can't expect somebody who is a non-bird keeper to be aware of all the ins and outs of feeding the birds, and also you can't expect them to look after even a moderate setup or a small setup like myself with only 6 breeding cages and a couple of flights, without doing some adjustments for them to make this easier for them. So that's what I'm going to talk about in this next little bit of the video, is about what I do in terms of making life easier for a non-bird keeper to look after my birds whilst I'm away. And the first of those things is, as you can see behind me, so I close down as many of the cages as possible, and I certainly wouldn't have any birds breeding whilst I'm away, because that's just not practical at all. So All the birds that were in the breeding cages have now been moved. I think I've said it in a previous video. I like to make sure I'm closing the breeding cages down, or the last pair has weaned their birds and I've got some time for them in the nappy flight before I go away. So that has happened, and in fact the last two youngsters that came out of the breeding cages about 2 weeks ago, and they went into the nursery flight. We'll just have a quick look at those because I haven't shown those last two birds in a previous video. So we'll just have a quick look at those before we move on and talk about the rest of the shed. We'll have a quick look at the last two birds to come out of the breeding cage and to go into the nappy flight. They're two cinnamon grey greens, as you can see. Youngest is on the left and the eldest is on the right. And I must admit, when I was looking at these in the breeding cage, when they were still in the breeding cage, the older bird, the one on the right, did look much better than the one on the younger bird on the left, and probably still so, although of course there is a little bit of an age difference. But I'll just try and talk through some of the positives of these birds. Normally when I'm looking at the birds I always talk about the negatives in them, what I see in terms of the faults rather than the positives. We'll start with the younger of the two birds, then the smaller one, this one here. So in terms of this bird, it does have a reasonably straight back and holds itself in a fairly nice position. Sits well on the perch, as I say, has a reasonable amount of feather in the body and is complete. So for the bird so complete, doesn't show any major sign of a hinged tail, and given that it's still got a bit of growing to do, it's a reasonably long bird already, so I expect it to be quite a long bird overall. Will it be a keeper? I think the time will tell. I need to give it at least another month or two to find out, and so when I assess the birds in September we'll have a look at it then again. So let's have a look at the older of the two birds then. So pan across. So here's the older of the two birds. I should have said both of these are cock birds, by the way. So the older of the two birds. This bird, I think, sits a little even better on the perch than the younger one. Sometimes when it's sitting, it does show that slightly arched back that I know some judges like. I'm not a particular fan of it, but I know some judges like it, giving it a little bit more swank. It's not showing that at the moment, but the other good thing I think about that arch in the back, slight arch in the back, is it prevents the hinged tail from showing, so, or from becoming a fault on the bird. So I'm hoping that that will mean this bird will not have that hinged tail that some of my birds suffer from. It's bigger overall than the younger one, but that might just be because it's I suppose 3 or 4 days older than the youngest of these two birds. This bird is showing some sign of feathering coming down across the eye, which I quite like, and it's got a nicely tucked in beak at the moment, so it may well be that the face on this bird will develop nicely. It shows no opalescence over the back of the head, and actually I quite like the look of the way the cheek areas of this bird are beginning to develop. This bird probably will be a keeper. So there we are. That's the last of the two young birds to go in that will be moved into the nappy cage, and the last of the birds from the breeding cage. As always, if you have any thoughts on what you see, do drop me a line, let me know. So that's the last two birds then that we've, or the last two youngsters from this year's breeding season. One of those, actually the oldest of those, has over the last 2 weeks developed into quite a nice bird. We'll probably have a look at her once I'm back off, or him once I'm back off holidays, but I've just literally been down to the nappy flight to look at how the emptying process of getting the birds out of the nappy flight, and he was sat next to a much older bird that is much bigger already, so I think it's going to be quite a big bird, but who knows, we'll have to see how he develops. So there we go, that's those last two birds. The rest of the setup, so breeding cages, as I say, have all been closed down. The stock cages, both the new stock cages that we looked at with the show team in, that also house the two new birds, the two new arrivals that are being quarantined, and my other stock cage that I've used sometimes when I'm splitting pairs, or the old stock cage that I've used, are all now empty. So there will be no birds in any of those, or the birds from there, and from the nappy flight that you can just see behind these two stock cages. I'm going to move these when I sort the stock cages somewhere else in the shed once I've come back off holiday, once I sort the whole shed out and have a little bit of a revamp anyway. So the nursery cage behind will also be completely empty, and I'm going to move all of those youngsters out into the main flight now. Clearly that does present a little bit of a problem because some of those may be a little bit younger than I would normally want, but they're all feeding, they all have been in there for at least 2 weeks, if not 3 weeks, so they've had some time to adjust to not being in the smaller breeding cages. So I'm hoping they'll fend okay out there in the main flight. So that in effect leaves me with just 2 flights, so the finch flight and the main budgerigar flight. So those are the only 2 flights that the person will need to look after. And the second area that I change is my free feeding regime, and I'll talk a little bit about that now. So like I say, feeding is the other area that I need to think about, because I can't expect the person looking after them to do all the various bits and pieces that I add on top of the normal seed that I give them. So you know, things like the soft food and tonic seed and the various other bits and pieces that I would normally feed my birds during when I'm here. So what I try to do is to get it down to feeding just 2 types of seed. So the budgies will just get the main budgie breeders seed, so that's, they're going to just get fed that. They won't get any of the extra tonic seeds or red millet, and no soft food when they're in the main flight. So they will just get 1 type of seed, and the same with the finches. They will just get a foreign finch mix, and again they won't get any of the soft food, and certainly no of the frozen live food or frozen pinkies that I will sometimes give those every so often. So the seed will be withdrawn down to just 2 types of seed. The other thing I will do is that I have put some bigger feeders in both the budgie flight and in the finch flight to enable the seed to last much longer. So I'm only going to ask the person that's coming in to actually have to do seed about once every or about twice a week, so on a Wednesday and a Saturday, say. So that's my plan, so they won't have to constantly be in and out of the flight topping up every morning. I do check that there is sufficient seed for them to last, so that won't be a problem, and particularly with the budgies and with the finches, they never get through all of that seed within the 3-day period that we're talking about. So that's feeding. The other big concern, of course, is watering, particularly at the moment where we've got really hot weather, and the water can go stale quite quickly in this heat. So I needed to think about that. So the first thing is there will be no additives in the water, so I won't be putting anything additional into the water. It will just be straight fresh water straight out the tap, what I've always used. So that's what they will get. And again, For the budgies, it's not really a problem because you will have seen in a previous video that I feed using I suppose a reservoir tank that then comes down to some nipple type feeders or some little nipple type drinkers that they can access, and that reservoir will easily last a full 2 weeks. So in actual fact, I'll just get the person just to top it up once a week, and that will be sufficient for the water there. The finch is slightly different, and I will add some additional drinkers, and they're the flow type, the gravity flow type drinkers, so they shouldn't get soiled. Add some additional ones of those, and they will the water in those will be changed every time the feed is topped up. So again, it will be twice a week rather than every day. It's not ideal, but like I say, you can't expect somebody, a non-bird keeper, to look after the birds. Ideally, I'd like the water changed every day, but that's just not going to be practical for them. So I'll have to be down to that. So that's my changes that I will make to both the feeding and water in the cages. And for those 2 weeks, that should be fine. That's what I've done previously, and it's been fine previously. So I'm hoping, touch wood, there shouldn't be any more problems. And the final bit then is what you would expect the person who's looking after your birds to do if something goes wrong. And you can't really expect them to do too much. If you keep livestock, one of the guarantees is that at some stage you will end up with dead stock, and sod's law will have it that something's going to happen when you're away. So you need to consider that. What are you going to do? So if one of your birds, one of your older birds, or one of the birds becomes sick and dies, what are you going to ask the person to do? Are you expecting them to take ring numbers and all that stuff, or just dispose of the bird? So for me, I'm not going to ask somebody to start looking at a dead bird's leg to get the ring number. When I next come to sort all of the birds out, I will know which one's died, or if he tells me the colour of which one has died. With only a small stud, it's relatively easy for me to find out. But you will need to think about that, and of course you'll need to make sure that they've got your contact details. So in the event of any real emergency, they can contact you and ask you and explain what's happened and all that, and you can give some advice. But again, as I say, you can't really expect them to do masses in terms of if there is something, if a bird escapes or whatever, that sort of thing. So you're just going to have to hope that for those 2 weeks the birds manage to survive and look after themselves as best as possible. And if something goes wrong, try and guide them through any process that you might have. Well, as I say, that's about all we've got time for in this video. And with me going away, clearly there's an issue around me posting videos. Normally I like to post one once a week. I have tried to do a number of videos that will be posted in the normal sort of time whilst I'm away, but clearly they won't be posted anywhere else other than on YouTube. So if you're not a subscriber to the channel and you don't have notifications, or you don't have notifications turned on, then you may not be aware that I've posted those. So as I always say, do subscribe, and then when those are released on the due release date, you will get notification that those videos are up there. One of those will be a video of a talk that Jim Laurie did at the Swindon BS. There are 2 parts to that talk, and the first one of those will be released whilst I'm away on holiday. The second one, I'm hoping, will be a short video looking at opaline. I did a little while ago, I did a 60-second cinnamon. Somebody asked if I could do some more. I'm hoping to do, before I leave to go on holiday, a 60-second opaline video. So touch wood, we'll get that one out, and those will be the 2 that will be released whilst I'm away. So like I say, if you haven't subscribed or you don't have notifications on, do turn them on, and then you'll be aware of when those videos are actually released. But as always, until the next video, please do hit the like button, comment, are always welcome. Let me know what you do when you go away on holiday, and how you think about minimising the impact that has on your shed and on the person looking after them. But until the next video, please do stay safe and enjoy your birds.